discussing today property which is presently both inside and outside the city limits. The inside the city limits portion is zoned A1 agricultural, a city designation. The remaining portion is Salina County Ag, a county designation. The request that's before you is to take that 40 acres and to rezone it to a planned service commercial district. What planned districts mean is that it allows for some flexibility of basic standards that are in a C5 district. It allows for modifications to the list of uses if that is desired. It also builds in a site plan component to consideration of the zoning. The property we're talking about had historically been owned by Comco of Kansas. They recently sold that to a Kansas City development group, and they have a desire to develop it into a retail shopping center. At this point, the primary identified anchor would be a Menards store, and that would be on the southernmost portion of this 40-acre tract. The applications that we have in front of you are rezoning, a preliminary plat, layout, and then annexation of the pieces that have not yet been brought into the city limits of the city. And so what you have in your packets relates to what is identified as proposed Lot 4, and that is a site plan for the Menard site. Shows you the location, dimensions, setbacks of the proposed building, total floor area, site coverage, access, parking areas, and conceptual landscaping on the Menard site. The majority of this site was annexed into the city in 1997. That was at the time that the Magnolia Interchange was constructed at I-135. We're considering the addition of about 9 more acres to add in the city limits to give us a full 40-acre tract. I think most of you are familiar with the C5 Service Commercial District. It is a general commercial district. It does allow uses that have outdoor display and storage, which would include a lumber yard and home improvement center. We've listed for you some of the other uses allowed. Those would be auto sales, retail stores, restaurants, things of that nature. Again, because this is a planned district, there is the option of deleting what anyone would perceive as incompatible uses for this location or surrounding area from the list of possible uses. There's also the ability, if a district's applied for, the Planning Commission also has the discretion to do a lesser change. We've summarized some of the basic requirements. 7,500 square foot minimum lot sizes. We're far above that in what we're seeing here. Parking requirements are established for retail stores and restaurants. Lumber yards would be considered retail space. We addressed outdoor storage. One of the issues that does come up is the distinction between C3 and C5. C3 really envisions indoor retail, and C5 is designed for outdoor. The Mid-State Plaza, Central Mall, Target, places like that are zone C3. Places where you see outdoor display, car lot areas tend to be C5. We just pointed out the ongoing issue with Sutherland's from the standpoint that they assured the city that C3 would work for them, that they could fit within those parameters, but they haven't really conducted themselves as an indoor display only. And so that's why in this case, if you're talking about a home improvement store and a lumber yard and the way those traditionally operate, C5 is the zoning that fits that the best. I wanted to talk a little bit about signage. The signage is the same in either district. 4 square feet of sign area for lineal foot of building frontage. In planned districts, the Planning Commission has had the discretion to limit the total number of pole signs. Wanted to point out that in C5, the pole sign maximum height is 50 feet, but if you are adjacent to an elevated roadway or a bridge, which is the case here with Magnolia Road, you can have a sign up to 70 feet in height. So the sign that's being requested as part of the Menards project would be a 70-foot tall sign with 600 square feet of sign area. So the exceptions that are being requested, the standard C5 is a lumber yard is generally a conditional use that is being requested as a permitted use in this district, and the general height limit for a front yard fence or screening fence is 6 feet. There's a proposal to have a 14-foot tall front yard screening fence along Virginia Drive, and then just to point out that we are talking about off-premise instead of on-premise signs. So to just discuss the zoning factors, this property, once it's adequately served with utilities due to its location, is probably the highest and best use is not agricultural, and certainly the A1 zoning inhibits any sort of commercial development for the property. If you look at what is around, the future land use plan shows all 4 quadrants of the interchange as retail commercial. If you look to the east of this area, that area is almost all zone C3 and C5. So certainly the zoning being requested would be compatible with zoning and uses of nearby property. If we look at public utilities and services, they are lacking at this time, but there is a plan to bring them to the area. And if you look at the city as a whole, this really is an infill site. It's bordered by the city on 4 sides. There's development to the west of it, so it truly is an infill site. And then if you look at the comprehensive plan, that does support the development of this property for commercial purposes. I think what I would point out then is that what we're looking at is Plan C5 for what will essentially be 3 development lots. And what we have is a known user or development for Lot 4. So this lot would be Plan C5. This lot would be a detention basin area. This lot would be Plan C5, and this lot would be a Menards store. And so what we have is a specific plan for this. With a plan designation, that means when there are specific plans for this, they would come back to the commission at that time. If we just walk you briefly through the site plan for Menards, they've got a lot that has 15 acres. Their total store area, the building area, which would be enclosed space, would be 162,000 square feet. They'd also have 40,000 square feet that would be under roof or overhang. But given the size of their site, that's just a little over 30% of the lot. One of the things that you would notice here, which I think was similar to Logan's Roadhouse that you saw earlier this fall, is the orientation of the building. The plan is to orient it so the front would face I-135, the rear portion would face Virginia Drive, which is a public street and what we would consider a front yard for zoning purposes, but not functionality wise. So the main entrance would be on the east, facing I-135. There would be so your entryways would be on the east, oriented to this lot, and the interstate being here. The rear area would be an enclosed working lumber yard, and there would be a 14-foot tall screening fence along that west boundary of that lumber yard area. The exterior of the store would consist of precast concrete panels with horizontal accent striping. The store building itself would be 27 feet tall, and then there's a mansard area here at the entrance with the maximum height would be 38 feet. We have reviewed this for setbacks, parking, landscaping, those details. And if you could go back to the site plan, John. I would just point out that this is the property line. You've got a 25-foot setback before you reach this fence, 25-foot setback on the north. So that 25-foot yard area would be landscaped. We've looked at the parking ratios, and we find that the 454 spaces here would meet the city's minimum requirements. No adjustment needed there. And then to get your bearings, this would be the interstate, a large pole sign here. And then does that scan up, John? Okay, I didn't know if you could pan that higher. But there is a pole sign located up here on lot 1 as well. So the two primary signs would be here and here within signage on the building. We looked at both perimeter and parking lot landscaping. Again, we've got 25-foot wide buffers on the west and the north, and the landscape islands within the parking lot meet the city's minimum requirements. There may be an adjustment to some of these islands based on the final placement of fire hydrants, because we don't want vegetation or bushes or shrubs prohibiting access to a fire hydrant. So these islands could be adjusted somewhat to accommodate fire hydrants. But from a building height, setback, parking, landscaping standpoint, there are no variations or exceptions that are being requested. We have I think I might direct you to number 10, John. Would be number 10 on the plat. In terms of traffic and access, what is being discussed and was primarily of interest is the access to the site is going to be from Magnolia Road into a new street, Virginia Drive, that would extend to the south. And so two important things: we're looking at the need for dedicated turn lanes, the ability to match up with perhaps future access to the north, and then whether there was in fact a need for a signalized intersection at this location. So when KDOT did the interchange, they restricted access all along here up to this point. So this is really, although it's at the far west edge of the site, it was the first approved location for access. And so this would have a single access opening on Magnolia. What's being proposed is a 3-lane section here with a dedicated left turn, so that vehicles that were leaving this site wouldn't create stacking issues for cars that simply wanted to make a right turn. And then there's also a proposal to add a center turn lane, which is a little harder to see on Magnolia, with a lane around the outside. We looked at fire access. We looked at the layout of the parking lot. All of those items would conform with our commercial standards. The developer did prepare and submit a traffic study as part of the rezoning application. The study concluded that a traffic signal would not be warranted at the Magnolia Road, Virginia Drive intersection, just based on this commercial development. I think it also has to be borne in mind that sometime long-term, Virginia Drive may very well tie back down all the way to Hollybrook and Schilling Road, and it would serve as a collector street west of the interstate. So the action that's being requested today would be to rezone the property and to approve a site plan for Lot 4, Block 1. And in our planned commercial district, we refer to both preliminary and final site plans. This we've consistently, I think, identified as a preliminary site plan for Menards because this is a preliminary application. But in our review of it, it has the same amount of detail and information that we would get on a final site plan, such as you saw for Logan's Roadhouse or other projects like that. So we would think that any action that you took today and had any questions about relating to Menards, that we would treat this as the Planning Commission action, formal action on the Menards site plan, and that this would be both a preliminary and a final plan for those purposes. So what we were looking at for recommended alternatives would be, alternative number 1 is what is being formally requested, and that would be Plan C5 zoning for Lot 1 to the north, Lot 3 to the east, and the Menards site, and all the things that go with C5 zoning. And that would be subject to satisfactory platting of the property. You could, if you had any concerns about lists of uses or the developer of the property did, other options would be that Plan C5 with certain uses deleted, or Plan C3 for lots 1 and 3, the outlots. You could recommend denial of the request if you don't think the zoning being requested is compatible with the comprehensive plan or the zoning of nearby property, or you could postpone consideration of the request if you believe you need more information to make a recommendation. Our recommendation would be that we approve the request for Plan C5 zoning and the site development plan for Lot 4, Block 1. And then we've outlined some stipulations there, one of which would be that final site plans for Lots 1 and 3 would come back to you, that plans and specifications for the detention pond would be approved by the city engineer before any building takes place, that clarify that the developer in this project will be responsible for improvements at the Magnolia Road, Virginia Drive intersection, and that the expectation is that development of each site, including the Menard site, would be in accordance as to the site plan, as to landscaping, building elevations, and signage. If for some reason that development didn't occur and there was a different plan for Lot 4, that would come back for your consideration. But we think those items identified on page 12, the interstate frontage, the visibility, the commercial zoning on the other side of the interstate, the fact that there will be public utilities provided and the developers will pay their proportionate share of extension costs, and the comprehensive plan all support approval of this request. We do have some items that relate to layout in the platting section, but I think at this point we would focus any questions on the commercial use aspect and any specific items that relate to the Menards site plan. If you have questions about drainage or about the traffic study, I would refer those over to Mr. Stack or Mr. Nelson, who could address those. But with that, I think I'd be open to any questions about the commercial use aspect of this and the zoning, and if not, then we should hear from the applicant.
Okay, thank you, Dean. This is a public hearing, so we'll hear all people that have a concern one way or the other on this issue at a specific time, but first we'll address from the bench. Any questions of staff before we go to the public? Any questions of Dean on any of this?
On the sign, are they requesting for waiver or exception just one 70-foot pole sign?
Yes, and really it's not, I mean, we have 70-foot pole signs on the other side of the interstate near Schilling Road. What we're really noting is as the difference or exception here is that you're being asked to approve a site plan for Lot 4, but the signs that are part of that site plan are located on Lot 1 and Lot 3. So it's really the off-premise nature of that, but the applicant can be more specific about their plan, but the 70-foot sign is on I-135, and then the sign that is on Magnolia Road is both shorter and smaller in size. So yes, only, I guess what our interpretation of this is if they came back and said that they wanted to put a 50-foot or 70-foot sign, say, in the parking lot for Menards in addition to this, that's not what you're being asked to approve. You're basically being asked to allow them to take their sign and move it from Lot 4 to Lot 3 next to the interstate.
And then the one that's going in Lot 1 conforms with your recommendation of 150 square feet and 30 feet in height?
Yes. And I think what we'll do for the benefit of the applicant and the developer is obviously the fact that you have a Menard sign on Lot 3 or on Lot 1 doesn't preclude the tenants or users of those lots from having their own sign, which you will review at the time that those sites develop. But what we tried to do here was identify through sign easements, place those on these outlots so that any future user of Lot 3 or Lot 1 takes those knowing that those signs are approved in that location and in place, and they will have to work around that. Because what you don't want to occur is for Lot 3 to be sold to somebody else and have them tell Menards to please move their sign. So the access easement is what will run with the land, and anybody who takes Lot 3 will take it subject to that sign easement. So
I'm a little confused about street names on this preliminary plat or plan here. We have Magnolia Parkway. Is that really Virginia Circle?
That's what, and that's really addressed in the platting items, but it was preliminary labeled as Magnolia Parkway. We looked at that and determined because it was parallel and didn't connect with Magnolia, it conflicted with Magnolia Road, but it does physically connect with Virginia Drive, so our recommendation, and it's been referred to other places as Virginia Court. So it does show up on some of the preliminary drawings as Magnolia Parkway, but the recommendation would be that its name be Virginia Court.
Now, regarding Virginia Drive, again, this might be a platting question. Is this all east of the quarter section line, or does the section line run down the middle of the street as it does many times?
No, it will be offset so that and I don't know exactly how it falls, but I believe that the east 50 feet of the right-of-way for Virginia Drive will be in one quarter section, and a portion of the right-of-way will be in the northwest quarter section. So what is occurring here, which we'll get into more detail in the plat, is that you have 60 feet of right-of-way for Virginia Drive. 50 feet of that is coming out of this tract. 10 feet of it is coming out of the two adjoining tracts to the west. So instead of having the road entirely on this tract, or the center line of the road straddling the quarter section line, it's going to be more like 50 and 10, with 10 feet coming out of the parcels directly west.
Now, Virginia Drive is going to cul-de-sac at the southern edge of Lot 4. Is that right?
That's correct. But it's identified as a temporary cul-de-sac, meaning that the expectation is it will continue on to the south, but for the interim, it will have a place to turn around.
Now, there's one sketch in here that kind of shows it does not line up with Virginia Drive coming off of, or Virginia Drive coming off of Schilling. It lines up with, I think it's Evergreen.
You're talking about maybe one of the color inserts that's in your...
Yeah, I think it
and
is.
I believe...
But looking at a city street map, it lined up that way also because
okay.
Virginia
didn't
off of
wanna-
Schilling is not on the quarter section.
We did not want to put that in here because it would potentially confuse things, but in 2001, a master plan was approved for this area that had Virginia Drive curving to the east and lining up with Virginia Drive in the Hollybrook addition. Not Evergreen, but Virginia Drive. We don't know exactly how that's going to occur till there are plans for laying out the properties to the south. And the original plan had utilities following the alignment of the future street, but since the future street is not as defined now as it was previously, the utilities are going to follow their own alignment and the street will come along later. But I think we have that somewhere, but I'd rather leave that for discussion of the plat.
Okay. Well, I guess I was going to ask Nick what the anticipated land use would be to the south of this 40-acre tract.
You want to show number 4 there, John? I think where that line falls could be variable, but just explain this map. The red is retail commercial land use, and this is kind of a transition of that. This is on the current plan shown as future business park, which might be light industrial, warehousing, offices, things of that nature. And then south of that would be some transition to residential, this being Hollybrook, this being Virginia Drive as it exists. So long term, an extension from here up to here in some fashion will occur. We just don't know that exact alignment, and that immediately north of Hollybrook would be a residential, but commercial could extend down into here, but at some point you'd have a transition to residential. It could be apartments, it could be some other form of housing, but that's the general plan for that area.
Okay. Other questions from the bench? We'd like to hear from the applicant. Or his or her representative. Your name and address, please.
Okay. Theron Berg, 4777 Menard Drive, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, 54703. I work in the real estate department at Menards. Salina is obviously my project. We are excited. We are building several stores in mid-sized markets in Kansas in the next year or two, this being one of them. I can certainly answer any questions that you have, but I think Dean gave a pretty good summary, and I'm going to sit back down unless there's some questions.
Any questions of the developer? Okay, stick around, and we'll now open it up to the public. This is a public hearing. We're rezoning this parcel of land from agricultural to either C5 or C3. Any comments from anyone, both positive and negative? This is a public hearing. Okay, your name and address.
My name is John Marietta, and I'm representing Comco, which would be the property just south of that. And I just had a question in the map, Dean. We're showing two configurations for the cul-de-sac, and it was my understanding we had pretty much agreed on the...
Right. That was to illustrate how it had moved, and we'll
Okay.
see what drawing John can get up there. That some of these are preliminary, and some of them were revised. But I believe all the plat drawings will reflect this configuration. But this was discussed, and this is what we ended up with, and this is what the plat will have, which is this was just to show that as an option. But this, we have one that shows it completely circular here, but it will be slightly offset. So that is the cul-de-sac arrangement that we'll have there. And again, the idea is that it's temporary, so that as this Virginia Drive is extended out, that bump out or wing on the west will be eliminated, the curbing will be taken out, and the street will be extended on. So the reason we're calling this out is temporary is to call out that it will physically be removed, and some of the right-of-way will revert back to Comco when that's done.
Great. I just wanted to clarify that point. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Any questions of this gentleman? Now, does some of that, for example, on the west edge, get into land to the west? And
Yes, it does.
And who's the owner of that? Comco?
Comco.
Okay. Does Comco also own the land to the south? Okay.
Yes.
Anyone else from the audience?
John, if you wanted to put up under the annexation that map number 2, if you could get to that, that might help just a little bit with the puzzle pieces.
Dean, point of clarification, if I may. John's got an older map that shows some of those easements in the wrong location. That might be adding to some of the confusion.
Would you come to
John,
the
as
microphone?
in,
John, you have both. Excuse me, Jeff Gillum, local architect representing the developer. I've noticed, you might look in your packet, I believe you have the correct site plans and layouts, but I am noticing we've got some older exhibits that we're putting up here. For instance, one that shows the signage. I think Dean's got a pointer here for me. This is not correct. If you look in your packet, it has been scooted up to where we now have the detention pond, and it's right along that easement. So if you can find, I'll see
Right
if I-
next to the detention pond.
Yeah, if you look at your,
probably in the plat section, because those drawings are more current.
fabulous handout. Do you have that page number, Dean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in the preliminary plat report, and that would be drawing 2 under the plat, John, under PO 8-6 is what Jeff's referring to.
Yes, this is correct. This is what you should have in your packet. So this is the
Yeah.
current sign easement. It makes a lot more sense, as you can see there.
It's tucked up, so it's just south of the detention basin.
And then,
Yeah, and if you went to 3, John, that
and then
would
here
show it more
again, you see
clearly.
the correct cul-de-sac in the corner.
Yeah, like this.
I just want to make sure.
Okay, thank
Any
you.
other questions? Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? If not, I'll bring it back to the bench for discussion and hopefully action.
Wanted to clarify just the one thing we wanted to present as an option to the owner developer is if they wanted as developers to exercise any desire to delete or exclude certain C5 uses, that's primarily why that was presented as an option. But in discussing that, they just indicated they wanted to go ahead with the request as submitted, which would be Plan C5 for the 3 development lots. And I think the other thing we would point out is that Lot 2, Block 1 is designated as a detention basin area today. It's theoretically possible long-term that if you had a larger, more regional detention solution that was south of this or something, that potentially that could be eliminated if there was a substitute detention somewhere else. So it is not likely, but theoretically possible that Lot 2 could be developed later, so that's why it's designated as a lot also. But the request that's before you and from the developer would be Alternative 1, which would be Plan C5 or PC5 for the entire tract, which is Alternative 1. And the conditions that we have outlined there are based on Alternative 1.
That explains a lot. Helps clarify that. Any other questions or comments? Where are we on this?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve application Z08-9 with the 7 conditions outlined by the staff.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. 7-0. So what we did here is we rezoned it.
You rezoned a 40-acre tract, and
And-
now you're going to look at the individual layout for lots that zoning would be applied to.
Okay, now, we did approve the preliminary site plan
Yes.
in that motion. Okay. Item number 3, application number P08-6, filed by Magnolia Development Partners, Premier Properties of Comco of Kansas, requesting approval of a preliminary plat of the Magnolia Commons Addition, a proposed 4-lot subdivision of a 40-acre tract of land located at the southwest corner of Magnolia Road and I-135. Dean?
Yeah, I will explain briefly why in item 2 we had a single owner. All the property that's requested for rezoning is owned by Magnolia Development Partners. But in our plat, as Mr. Funk pointed out, we have a strip of land for the west right-of-way portion of Virginia Drive. That land is today owned by Premier Properties and Comco of Kansas, so they are participants in the plat by virtue of providing some of the right-of-way there for Virginia Drive. But we are now looking at the layout of lots, easements, and right-of-way to go with the zoning that was just discussed. So this 40-acre platted area would be subdivided into 3 commercial building lots and then 1 lot set aside for a detention pond. The access, as discussed, would be Virginia Drive, a public street that would be constructed south from Magnolia Road. All of our internal traffic movement and circulation will be based off of Virginia Drive and back out to Magnolia. So Lot 1 and Lot 4 would be primarily accessed from Virginia Drive or Virginia Court, and then our exception is Lot 3. And as proposed, the public street portion of Virginia Court would terminate here. This would be a north-south access easement that would function really as a private street, although it would not have a name, it would not have right-of-way, it would be an access easement. That is the plan for providing access to Lot 3. So we're talking about a 15-acre lot for Lot 4 Menard site. The lot to the north here is 12.7 acres, and then 4.92 acres for Lot 3. And again, Lot 2 is set aside for shared stormwater detention. So technically, the proposed Lot 3 is landlocked, although it does have access. This would require an exception to the requirement that all platted lots have frontage on a public or private street. As you can see, the minimum lot size in C5 is 7,500 square feet. We're well above that. If in the future somebody wanted to come in and divide Lot 1 and 2 and sell half to one user and half to another, they could do that by a deed and a property split without replatting the property. The same would go for Lot 3. That could be leased or deeded separately without replatting. When we look at the variance requests, there have been some additional discussions in this area. One thing we do know that what's labeled on some drawings as Magnolia Parkway, but what will eventually be Virginia Court, that is a dead-end street and it exceeds 600 feet. So that requires that an exception to that 600-foot maximum be approved. We're still having discussions about item 2 there, the possibility of a cul-de-sac. Wilson and Company, the engineers for the applicant, are still looking at design options for getting some kind of turnaround there. If that's not the case, and it comes back to you in a final plat form, then what we'd be looking for is to have some sort of guaranteed access or access easement through the Menards parking lot, because if you're coming down this street and you want to get back out, the only way to do it would be to go through the parking lot and come back out, which introduces street traffic into the Menards lot. So Virginia Court extends 950 feet east of Virginia Drive. It would have an L intersection right here, and there would be a north-south access easement. And so the proposed access to Lot 3 would be that easement instead of a public street. So if you look at this situation, one of the things that influences this the most is the fact that the detention basin is wedged right in here, and it borders Virginia Court on the north and on the east, and it extends 320 feet in from the interstate. So the terminus of that street's got a pond on two sides, and then the parking lot for Menards on the other.
Dean?
Yes.
Before I lose track of this, the easement then between Lot 4 and Lot 3, that will look just like the parking lot. There won't be anything that looks more road-like in that. Is that correct?
Well, how easy, John, would be to go back to the Menards site plan. You're going to have curbing here and curbing along these islands.
Oh, okay.
And so you will have curbing on this side that will define that. I guess you'd have to hear from the developer or their designers about our expectation would be, maybe not initially, that this would probably just have an asphalt edge to it, but as site plans developed for Lot 3 and driveway locations were known, that we would get curbing that would define the east side except for where driveway locations were approved. So I guess our thought is that with curbing along here in the islands and probably some form of curbing except for driveway openings, that you would have something that would not just look like an aisle in a parking lot, but would have defined edges to it.
And that's wide enough for two cars?
It is a projected width of 40 feet, which is wider than even a conventional street. So it's difficult to read, but the total width on that is 15 feet of it would be on the Menards lot, and 25 feet coming off the lot 3 there, for a total width of 40 feet.
You're going to have a kind of a curbing along that east edge to direct your drainage to the holding pond, won't you? You know, you're going to have a large parking lot that's going to drain which direction, to the east and to the north?
Well,
Get to
the
that.
goal is to get water from south to north. I might defer that to the engineers for Wilson and Company, but you would think that curbing would be one of the preferred methods for directing that water to the north. Again, we can only speak to what we see on the west side of that easement, but these islands are going to be curbed, and so there will be a defined edge to the west side, and as plans develop for the east side, we would expect it to be the same.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, that's fine. And again, you can see this is the L-shaped intersection. This is access easement. This is public street. And again, Wilson and Company is looking at a couple different arrangements whereby you could get some sort of public turnaround built into that street. So I think at this point it's premature to say that they're requesting a waiver from the cul-de-sac requirement at this time. As far as our utilities and drainage, the plan is, and I don't know if you've got maybe it's item 9 under the aerials, John. This is not real easy to read, but you have this in your packets, and the bold blue is kind of the skeleton of the major water distribution system. And so they'd be bringing a 12-inch line down Magnolia Road from Centennial, bringing it down the east side of Virginia Drive, tying it down straight here and over back to Centennial, so that you would get a loop system with 2 sources of flow. As far as the sewer, the nearest available sewer, which is farther south than the blue line there for water, there was a package plant or small sewage treatment plant at the air base, which was abandoned, and so an interceptor line was put in that runs from west to east, runs from here. It goes on the north side of Sam's Club and Tasker Edition and Quail Meadows, goes up to Magnolia Road, but the starting point is right here, and so the plan is to bring sewer lines down this direction and tie into a pump station here. And again, that will necessitate obtaining some easements on off-site properties. Certainly from parking lot and rooftop, we're going to have a lot of runoff generated, and Wilson Company has prepared a drainage study, which our engineers have reviewed, and that was located on Lot 2, Block 1, in that corner up against the interstate. The plan would be that the detention pond would be singular, and it would serve all the development, so there would be a shared responsibility by agreement amongst the lot owners of how that would be done. At this time, Westar indicates they plan to extend underground lines from Magnolia Road south into the subdivision, and the Kansas Gas Service indicates that they would need to bring gas across from the east side of the interstate over here. Again, Virginia Drive is dedicated public street. It would be a collector street. Virginia Court would have dedicated right-of-way. The north-south easement would be a access easement. I guess one other item would point out on the plat, there's a 15-foot easement that is on Lot 4 and Lot 3 coming over here. And then there's a twin or companion 15-foot easement south of that that's outside the boundaries of the plat, and that is a utility easement that Comco has agreed to match the 15 on the north side, and so that would be dedicated by separate instrument. I think you're aware that there is no sidewalk system on Magnolia Road today. However, Virginia Drive would be a public street, and as such, a new public street sidewalks would be required on both sides. And what would generally occur is two options. One option is to build sidewalks at the time the street is built. The downside of that is usually if you have vacant lots that are going to get built on, construction vehicles can drive back and forth across the sidewalk and bust it up, which then means you have to rebuild it. The other option, which occurs more frequently here, is that you would build sidewalks at the time building permits are issued. So if a permit was issued to construct a Menards store, this section of sidewalk would be built at that time, and then as Lot 1 developed, a section of sidewalk would be built up to Magnolia Road. We don't know what the future holds for Magnolia in the future as far as improvements, but if it was urbanized, I would imagine that there would be a sidewalk system or even a path system on Magnolia, and these sidewalks would tie into that. There is a plan at least to partially finance all these improvements with special assessments, and so in looking at the plat drawing, this is a preliminary plat, and we have the city engineers here, but before we went to final action on the final plat, we would want a letter from the city engineer indicating that they have reviewed the traffic study and that they agree with the findings and conclusions, particularly as to the no warrant for a traffic signal. We would want that in front of you at the final plat. Also a letter from them indicating their review and approval of the drainage study. As part of any project, when you want to discharge your runoff into the interstate right-of-way, KDOT has a permit process for that, so there is a discharge permit that would need to be obtained from KDOT so that we could assure you that this plan for taking the runoff and putting it into the right-of-way will in fact work. We would work with them to develop a maintenance agreement or covenants that provide for the maintenance of the detention basin and also maintenance of that north-south access easement. And then I think at this point we would probably preserve condition number 4 there if we do not end up with a cul-de-sac on a lot at the end of Virginia Court. Then we would want a note or something that the approved fire access turnaround would be within the parking lot on Lot 4, the Menards site. We would like to have particularly the twin off-site utility easement at the south end executed to go with the final plat. And then we have a number of corrections that we've discussed with Wilson and Company that would just need to be cleaned up prior to final action on the plat. So I think again we're focusing on the physical layout of streets, easements, lots, and blocks, and this would match up with the commercial zoning that you just recommended approval of. I would defer any questions about drainage and traffic to either our engineering staff or to the designers from Wilson and Company. I think with that we'd be open to any questions.
Okay, thank you, Dean. Any questions of Dean?
Will access to Lot 1 or Block 1, Lot 1, be only off of Virginia Court, or will there be breaks allowed off of Virginia Drive?
I think we noted in our report that we're requesting restricted access on Virginia Drive to 88 feet south of Magnolia Road. That's what our standards provide for, that here that you would have a distance of at least 88 feet, which is 4 cars stacked here, that would be restricted to there, so that you wouldn't have a request for a driveway there. But I'll defer that to Mr. Stack or Mr. Nelson, but absent slope or topography, once you get south of there, it would seem like it would be reasonable to have a well-placed driveway on Virginia Drive. But I'll let Mr. Stack or Mr. Nelson speak to that. But the plan was not to restrict access from Virginia Drive, but only up at the intersections to make sure we had stacking space there.
How far south was it, Dean?
88 feet, which is basically 4 car lengths, that you would have restricted access markings from here to about this point, which means that the first driveway that would be available would be from that point south. But there was no thought of restricting access from Virginia Drive, but certainly there will be a site plan submitted for that could be taken into account.
Yeah, I'd say we'd probably look at the site plan. We'd probably want a little further from the intersection. This development looks to be is going to generate quite a bit of traffic so far, from what we can tell. So 4 car lengths may not be enough, but we'll just have to look at that at that time.
They hope.
The traffic study, this traffic study shows that. We'll see how it goes.
Well, you're going to have development in these other lots that's going to generate much more traffic shortly, and I agree, 88 feet sounds very...
that's the bare minimum in our
minimum
driveway standards, that at an arterial street, the closest driveway can be as 88 feet from an intersection.
Talking about traffic, does Magnolia have to be widened, pavement any widening there to accommodate a turning lane?
Yes, it does. They're going to widen it to a 3-lane section there with the middle turn lane and the through lane, basically the 2 through lanes. I think there's a sketch of that up there.
Will they be hopefully fixing the railroad tracks at that point too?
Well, the railroad tracks are to the west here,
west
aren't
of
they?
here.
They're further down west. Are they pretty bad?
They're rough, yeah.
I'll note that.
I think most of us forget there's even a street there. Magnolia goes out there?
I have a question for Mr. Nelson. From what we've been shown so far, everything looks fairly straightforward with this. I read in the paper this morning that there's a July 3rd deadline for all these infrastructure improvements to be in place before to allow the store a correct time frame to get this all done. Is that a doable number?
We are optimistic that will be attainable, yes. We had the contract with the engineering agreement last night approved with Wilson and Company. I know that the utilities director has been working closely with the designers at Wilson already to make this happen. So we are on certainly an aggressive schedule, but we feel that we can indeed make this target.
Thank you.
Does this detention pond require a lift station? On this drawing, Exhibit F, you're showing where that first Phase 1 detention basin, a lift station.
That is correct. I think Mr. Miles could probably speak to that more authoritatively than we
please.
can. But
Name and who you're associated with.
Tim Miles with Wilson and Company.
Okay.
The KDOT ditch is fairly shallow there, so yes, there will be a lift station for a portion of it. We're actually planning on designing a combination pump gravity flow system where the pump system will basically handle any small flows that where the depth of the water doesn't get higher than about 5 feet. Once it reaches 5 feet, then it'll flow out gravity-wise. So that's the plan.
Is there enough capacity under I-135 to handle even a 100-year rainfall?
Well, our requirements are to meet a 25-year design storm. 100-year in that area, there's probably going to be a lot of water standing everywhere. The buildings are going to be high enough.
What size tube is that under the highway there, do you
It's
know?
a 36-inch pipe, and it goes underneath it'd be the southbound on-ramp. The water actually flows kind of to the north and then back west once you get across Magnolia into the big ditch to the dry creek, so it winds around a little bit.
Does that water then go on the north side of Magnolia to
Yes,
Dry
it goes
Creek?
north and then west to the dry creek, and then on north from there.
Okay. Any other questions on drainage?
Not on drainage.
Well, okay, thank you.
I kind of hate to mention it, but the plume of that chemical whatever, is that anywhere close to this?
There was a engineer that was doing a Phase 1 environmental review of this property. That was a question that they have. At this point, the plume is all far to the west of here, but the general migration pattern is from west to east, and there actually there is, or I believe there's 2 and perhaps a 3rd monitoring well that are currently located on this property, but there has been no signs of the plume detected this far to the east to date.
Let's see, well, we're still talking to staff, aren't we? Any other questions of Dean? Well, we'll again open it to the public. This isn't a public hearing, but anyone have any concerns? Issues you'd like to raise? Okay. Bring it back to the bench for further discussion and action.
I was just wondering from Mr. Burke, are there other retailers that you often partner with?
I don't know if I'd use the term partner, but we are in retail shopping centers with every major retailer that you can think of.
So whenever I would see a Menards, I wouldn't see a Pier 1 or...
Not every time, no.
Starbucks?
Well, I
think their days are over.
Starbucks, if that's an issue.
Yeah. I
I'd
don't
love
think,
for you to work on it.
well, I think Starbucks' expanding days are numbered for a while.
You have any anticipated plans of development of these other lots?
We don't. We won't actually own the rest of the lots, so
Yeah.
that's better directed towards the developer.
So this is just a curious part. There's no legitimate reason for us to ask these questions.
My name is Bob Eckhold. I'm the managing member of Magnolia Development Partner that owns the 40 acres that's working with Menards on this development. But no, we are actively pursuing other retailers. I asked the same question of Theron too, if he had anybody that absolutely would follow him. And we put together a pretty comprehensive study of not all of its 250 stores, but certainly around the radius, Nebraska, Iowa. There's one store in St. Joe, Missouri, and there's quite a few great retailers that obviously do follow Menards. So
Anybody you see coming up consistently, or?
well, there's always restaurants that, of course, are interested in certainly being a part of that development. A bank is a typical tenant that seems to follow Menards just because of the traffic and activity. but nothing in particular. But I mean, certainly a drugstore, certainly maybe a bookstore, certainly maybe a sporting goods store, and maybe even a Starbucks. But we're actively pursuing that.
Okay.
We just didn't want you to come all this way and not have an opportunity.
Well, he was stealing all my thunder. I mean,
I thought too.
thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. We're dealing here with a approval of a preliminary plat.
Boy, I'll move for it, and man, I'm never good at these moving.
We'll give it a try.
We've outlined, and again, I think the one that is most in question at this point would be item 4 there. Between now and when a final plat comes back, they are going to make an attempt at devising some sort of cul-de-sac turnaround on Virginia Court. But I think all of those 7 conditions on page 6, with 4 possibly being modified, would be appropriate.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I'll move that we approve application number PO8-6, filed by Magnolia Development Partners, LLC. I think we can leave out the rest, saying with those 7 suggested recommendations, and then looking at the final plat with the cul-de-sac or whatever they come up with at Wilson Engineering.
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Item number 4, application number A08-1, filed by Magnolia Development Partners, Premier Properties, and Comco of Kansas, Incorporated, requesting the annexation of 9.3-acre tract of land to allow it to be added to the proposed Magnolia Commons addition. Dean?
Thank you, Nat. You've decided this is Magnolia Commons addition is appropriate in this location. This is just a final cleanup item to ensure that the full 40 acres is incorporated into the city limits. As I pointed out, we have the 3 owners involved, and probably what's most unusual about this request is just the shape of the annexation parcel. And it's kind of an L shape or crescent shape, and it's because the Premier Properties and Comco are dedicating a portion of the right-of-way for Virginia Drive. The balance of the property is owned by Magnolia Development Partners, and that south piece there would be occupied by the Menards store. There's nothing here unusual about the request. We're not into any different electric service territory or water district. It's contiguous to the existing city limits, so there's no county commission involvement. And our recommendation would be to recommend that this 9 acres or L-shaped strip be brought into the corporate limits of the city. And then, John, you did have the map 2 there. This is, and if you could blow it up maybe beyond that. This is the kind of the jig. This says Comco of Kansas Inc. They were the former owners. That's now Magnolia Development Partners. So you have Premier Properties just owns this little 3 acres here. This is Comco. This is Comco. This is Larry Kerr is the owner of this property here, and then the Brown family owns this property over here. But the balance on the west and the south is owned by Comco, and that's how all that fits together. So for this, at this time, we would have a notch right here that would be formally annexed into the city. The remainder that's being farmed and all in that area is still outside the limits of the city. So with that, I'd address any questions that pertain to annexation, but this is really just a cleanup to get the full 40 acres incorporated into the city.
John, go back to that other drawing you had with that L-shaped piece.
My, look at us grow.
That north-south strip, is that the, what, 15 feet?
10 feet.
10 feet?
Yes.
That's on the other side, west of the quarter section line? Okay.
Roughly, yes. So, we're both in the northeast and northwest quarter section of this section. And again, the Virginia Drive is 50 feet of it is Magnolia Development Partners, 10 feet is Premier Properties and Comco, and then this piece here, with the exception of the little notch here for the cul-de-sac, would be the owned by Magnolia Development Partners and just part of the plat.
Any questions of Dean?
How much of the area to the north of Magnolia does the city, is part of the city?
None of it. If you go to number 2 there, well, you can show this one.
Yeah, right there.
None of what staff often refers to as the donut hole, because it's hollow, is that the city limit lines, the interstate here, this is the city limits over here, up like this. So this V, right, or this triangle is outside the city, and this square is outside the city today.
So Magnolia continuing to be a county road, that will continue because of that area?
Because of that pattern, and unless there's an agreement by which it's brought, part of the issue there is because of the lack of platting. There is no right-of-way for Magnolia. It's owned by the abutting owners. And so the county can't just say, here, annex it, because they don't own it themselves. And so what could hopefully occur is, as platting occurs farther west on Magnolia, we'll acquire that as right-of-way and gradually be in a position where the city will have ownership and maintenance of Magnolia Road.
Okay, any other questions of Dean? I don't think anyone there in the audience would be interested in this. We're sure you're interested in annexing this to the...
Urban sprawl! Stop the urban sprawl! We've grown by 600 square feet.
Stop here. What do you mean they're not interested?
Adds to the tax base.
Yeah, wow, hey,
Okay.
good idea.
Bring it back to the bench for discussion, action.
I move approval of application A08-1. See where their staff recommendations.
No,
Approve.
just approve.
Just to approve it.
Yeah,
I'll second that motion.
there you go.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve this request to annex this land into the city. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Well, thank you all for your participation.
Thank you for coming.
We wish you the very best with this venture.
Thank you.
Make some money.
Item 5. To consider proposed changes to the storm drainage/stormwater detention plan for the Grand Prairie Addition residential subdivision located on the south side of Cedar Ridge Drive east of Mariposa Addition. I think this has been on our agenda before, but there's some changes that need to be made, and Dean's going to tell us about that and what maybe we need to do or what we can do.
This is being posed really as a public discussion or hearing, and part of it is just some of the feedback questions that we're getting. We have a final plat that has been filed on the Grand Prairie Addition, and that is the residential subdivision proposed on north side of Cedar Ridge Drive that butts up against the municipal golf course. And back in March, you met and reviewed a preliminary plat, and that was recommended for approval, and there were two important items there, one of which dealt with the fact that their plan for off-site sanitary sewer connections was proposed to go through the common area on the Mariposa subdivision. And that common area is a privately owned and maintained detention basin. The other item was, again, a number of off-site easements and off-site drainage, that there was a requirement that we have some written approval from the Director of Parks and Recreation, looking at the boundary adjustments to the golf course and the location design of a detention retention pond plan on the golf course. And the what we observed in our discussions with both representatives of Parks and Recreation and Mariposa Homeowners Association was there were we worked through most of the easement alignments and questions about sanitary sewers and excavation, but the question of drainage, drainage pattern, drainage intensity kept coming up. The plan then came to us to relocate the pond that was previously planned on the golf course and staked out there and basically move it upstream up into the subdivision. Well, I think the thought or concern there is if you have a drainage way or basin and you take the pond and you move it upstream, then that creates a few more questions about what occurs downstream where the pond was formerly located. So basically we have concerns that were expressed to staff about potential downstream impacts from erosion on Mariposa's detention pond, and then in lieu of the large detention basin on the golf course, there was a plan to construct what were referred to as secondary ponds or basins on the golf course property. And the Parks and Recreation Director was asking staff what those would look like and how they would function exactly and impact the golf course. We found that we couldn't really address those questions the way we'd like to, so we have invited to this discussion the design engineer for the Grand Prairie project, and then probably the one that is of a staff-generated concern is that we have a cul-de-sac here and a slope and grading that sends water here and a flume that carries that runoff here to the golf course. And formerly this would have come off of here and come down into a pond, that pond proposed on the golf course property. Well, that pond is gone, and that pond is now here and primarily here. So then the question we had is if this was coming off of here in a flume and it was going into a pond and the pond is relocated, where's the water going to go, and where and at what point will it end up either on the golf course or the Mariposa pond? So I think we would want to take these items one by one. The first question would be the general question of how is the downstream recipients protected from velocity and intensity of runoff as a first question, and then the golf course personnel there's what are referred to as secondary ponds here and into here, and to get a better description is what is meant by secondary ponds, what they'll look like and how they'll function. And then the third item would be to address that. So I know that we have representatives of the Mariposa Homeowners Association here. I think in terms of presentation, I think we would ask that Mr. Adams, the design engineer, kind of give you a summary or overview of the changes to the drainage plan from what you saw in the preliminary plat, and then to be able to ask questions of him, and then to hear from concerns from Mariposa Homeowners Association, and I think Mr. Snyder representing the golf course also. So I think maybe we'd ask at this time Mr. Adams
Yeah.
to give kind of an overview, and we can put up whatever whatever we need to in the way of plans to point out. Maybe, John, we start with slide number 3, the grading plan.
Yeah, for the commission, this will not be an action item today. We won't take any action today. We're just trying to work out some problems.
Right, I think we did not want to bring the final plat for action or consideration cold with this change to it without having some preliminary discussion.
But give us your name and address.
Sure. I'm Greg Adams with Campbell & Johnson Engineers. I'm working out of Junction City office representing Cornerstone Development Group. Again, we appreciate all you guys' hard work you put into making sure Salina is developed well, and we appreciate the staff and how much they work with us. We really appreciate it. Just kind of a little bit of history. We had originally planned the ponds a little bit in the locations that you see there on the lower areas there. I probably should have brought a pointer, but right in there was where we were primarily going to locate our ponds, with the addition of a little one there. We but through the preliminary plat and shaping of the lots and so forth, and at the last minute came up with the idea and worked with the golf course. We've really appreciated their basically partnership in this, that they could maybe use a water hazard right there, and so that would basically be somewhat of a centralized location that would catch the majority of the water from the development. And after that design, and that's what we presented to you as a preliminary plat. But after we got into the design of it and the layout of it, and we had the surveyors come and actually stake it out in the field, we saw that there was a lot of established trees that nobody really wanted to lose. So we redesigned it a second time to try to avoid those trees and kind of spread it out a little bit further to the north, kind of up in this area, kind of trying to get it to fit in here. But that was going to create some issues of flooding of the fairways and so forth to get the detention that we needed. So basically the conclusion was that it wasn't going to work at that location. So as we talked, we met that day out in the field and saw that there's a little bit of room over here for a small pond that before you got up into the Mariposa pond. And we looked at that possibility, and but at the same time, I went back here and looked at this location and found that I could get the required storage in that area. Required storage meaning that there's a certain amount of runoff that leaves the development at this time, and according to City of Salina stormwater regulations, we're required to detain the additional runoff that will occur due to development for a 25-year storm.
What is the flow of the water?
Yeah, this property, it flows about any direction you want to. Which area are you talking about? Here it flows off to the west. Here it flows off to the north. Here it flows here. There, most of this flows across. Some of this flows that direction. Some of that flows that direction. Some of that flows that direction. But about 90% of it ends up over here and going to Mariposa's pond. And so, so honestly, the location of ponds is a little bit difficult in this scenario because of that. That road right there basically is on a crest where it flows either east or west. So to catch all of that, I mean, it's basically impossible. But we can collect, if we had I've lost my pointer. But, do you? Okay. Now I can't turn it off. Sorry. Anyway, you could have one right here, which we had, but because of the location, it's difficult to fit one in there. And due to the narrowness of this, it's difficult really to get one fitting in here as well. So what we believe is and really does cover what the stormwater regulations desired intent is to hold back the volume of water that development increases. So no, we don't. We capture about, and there was a slide that was up there, and it's in your packet. I think the last sheet kind of shows the drainage area. Not last sheet. Wasn't the last sheet.
I think it's number 1 there, John. On the we have that here for you.
Yeah, that one there. Kind of shows the development, and then I show a line down below that kind of covers the area that those detention ponds will hold. There's quite a bit of off-site area that some of it is our development, some of it is off-site, but those ponds hold back that amount of water from that area, partly our development and partly off-site. But the net result is that those ponds in those 2 locations hold back more than what the development will increase the runoff. It isn't all the development's water, but it is that water that would be coming to the Mariposa Pond from off-site, but we're capturing that water. So the end result is that we are holding back more water. And so the net result to the Mariposa Pond over here is going to be a lesser amount of water intensity. The cubic feet per second is going to be less after development than it is right now, and that's the goal. And so even though this water comes out from here undetained, water comes out from here undetained, the net result of all 3 areas is still less.
Mm-hmm.
So that is that's how we feel like we can use those detention ponds in that location and satisfies the stormwater requirements of the subdivision or the regulations.
Maybe Mr. Nelson already asked this question. Was there any thought given that that cul-de-sac on the west and the curtailment of the pond, was there any thought about just trying to have a much smaller or secondary pond in the area between holes 13 and 14 instead of the single large pond? Or coming back with an alternate? Maybe that's a question for Mr. Nelson.
Mr. Andrew, this afternoon, city staff met with the developers and Mr. Adams, and with Mr. Snyder and the superintendent of the golf course. We met to discuss some of the issues that we had here in relation to the detention and the runoff for the property. We understand Mr. Adams' comments and his opinions. We were having a little bit of trouble, I guess, just wrapping our hands around it and fully embracing it at that point. I guess, short and to the point would be we looked at several different options, including the potential for a smaller pond at the discharge point there between lots 59 and 60, which you're referring to. We also talked about the potential for a energy dissipation device. I believe it was a rock, kind of a rock monument or a big rock garden that would knocked the velocity and the energy out of the water as it came down the side hill and spread it out into a larger component. So yes, we did look at that this afternoon, and that's something that Mr. Adams was going to look at as a potential alternative here.
The thing that that will happen if you create a smaller pond right here, there's the issue. The overall issue of detention, I think, is fairly clear, but the velocity of water coming out of this pipe, I've got designed right now as part of the plans as a riprap, basically a channel into that widens out and slows the water down and spreads it out so that it comes off of the end of that at about 2 feet per second, which should be plenty slow to not cause erosion. Now, the thing that a small pond in that area, it will hold back a small event, maybe 5 year, maybe a 10 year. I'm not sure what we could get in there and what the golf staff would agree to as far as design and how it fits in with the fairways and so forth. And but it's not going to hold back a large event. And so it'll hold back a small event, but if it gets a little bigger than that, it's going to go over the top of that anyway. And so at some point, water is going to be crossing the course. And so I'm not sure. I can look at either option, but I can either slow it down right out of the pipe, or I can slow it down in a pond, and it's going to go over the top of it, and it's going to be basically the same situation, whether it's at the end of the pipe or over the emergency spillway. So we're just, we just met this afternoon, so I haven't really had a lot of time to think about it, but that's my initial thought, is that I'm not sure that's a great advantage to the course, and it just would add expense to the project to build another pond. But that's something we can, we're open to whatever city staff would want. But that's my initial reaction to a secondary pond.
I would note that if a secondary pond at that location were built, it would be a dry bottom pond. There would not be a pool of water designed as it was originally. So it would be just a dry bottom, grassy type of pond.
What do you usually consider to be the proper detention time, let's say on a 25-year storm? What's the detention time till you get to the dry bottom?
The current criteria for design of drainage would be to have the storm pass through within 24 hours.
And that's what I've done on these two ponds down here is size the pipe according to the volume of the pond, and that it'll drain out slowly in 24 hours. That gives the pond, any ponds below that, time to drain out as well. And I mean, just that's what keeps it dry, that you let it out and doesn't let it get sloppy, but it does hold it back for that 24 hours.
That way you can maintain vegetation and grass.
Right.
Maintain it. Just as a matter of curiosity, what kind of increase in volume of water is there in a 25-year storm event, undeveloped land versus developed? In, for example, this example here.
For the full development?
Well, just for any area, does it double the amount of runoff development, or is it 50% more, or?
You normally, I'd say it depends on the type of ground, the slope, and what's there before and what's going to be there after, but typically about 15%. 15 to 20%. Yeah, it could be more than that, but 15 to 20%, 25%. Just going, and Wayne, you guys can correct me, I'm going off of the runoff coefficient, changing from 0.2 or 2.5 to 45 or 50.5. So it's about 25%.
I think we're getting beyond our pay grade here. Why don't we just bulldoze those trees over there? If you were to build a brand new golf course, there's not going to be any trees. Just bulldoze those trees, build a pond, then we got the pond, plant some new trees. We got new trees in 20 years. Everybody loves it then.
Don't listen to him.
Oh, I'm no arbor. We'll plant more trees somewhere else.
Well, I've seen holding ponds with cypress trees in them. And
There you
they do
go.
very well.
So let's make it a
Extremely
let's
well.
make it a swamp layout.
Is that the concern, is flooding out trees with these ponds?
No.
Identify yourself, please.
I'm Steve Snyder, Director of Parks and Recreation for the City of Salina. The day we met out, the developers, engineers, golf course staff, as Greg mentioned, it was laid out, the surveyors. Middle of the afternoon, nice afternoon, a FISM pulled up to number 13 tee box. 3 guys hit it right in the water. And we looked at it right then and said, this will not work, besides the fact that the entire holding capacity of that pond covered cart paths on both 12 and 13. There are a number of trees that we would like to retain. Yes, we understand it in some cases that trees have to go and we can replant. That'll probably be the case of the 2 ponds that are connecting the front 9 to the back 9. But if we can save them, that was our intent. So we moved it a little bit to the east, basically. Even if we could have done a linear pond, we still had problems with most of this drainage area is in the landing area of every one of those holes that cross this area. And so we experienced firsthand exactly what was going to happen. And if we had the first FISM coming through there, we'd have probably had a lot of complaints if we would have continued with that plan.
So the pond is going to drain within 24 hours.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
The original plan that was before you with the preliminary plat, there would have been a permanent pool in that pond.
And lots of balls.
That's between 12 and 13?
Can I see
Pardon?
The bottom of the hill between 12 and 13? Was that the original permanent
No,
pond?
between the original pond was between 13 and 14.
Okay.
So now, what are we concerned about if
Right
the
in here.
ponds now are located in this position? We're concerned that the water, what are we concerned about?
Well, Steve got a pointer, but I'll go up
I'll go right here, I think.
I guess the point, we have water coming from this direction, we have water coming here, and we have water coming off here. And before, with the pond in this location here, all this water was getting contained in that pond before it got released. Now, water's coming out here, out here, out here, and so from this point, and this point, it's both going across the golf course and going down into the Mariposa Pond unimpeded from those points. And so when you move the detention upstream, then you've got more unimpeded flow downstream, and I guess the difference that staff was looking at it is that the pond below, between 13 and 14, was catching water from 3 different outlet points and detaining it, whereas by moving the ponds upstream, you've got water now coming into the course from 3 places, but only 1 real detention pond and then some secondary ponds. And then, of course, part of what I'm dealing with Mr. Snyder is that we have both utility and drainage easements that will be on the golf course property, and rightfully so. Mr. Snyder's asking, well, if I grant these developers an easement to detain water on golf course property, what exactly is it going to look like? Is it a pond? Is it just a flat area? Is it going to encroach into the play area? All those things, and that's part of the reason for this discussion, is that now we're down to the detail level, and if Mr. Snyder's going to be asked to grant easements for secondary ponds or areas to slow the water down on the golf course property, he rightfully needs to understand what those are going to look like and how they're going to function. And so, because the downstream catch basin that was going to catch everything isn't there anymore, we have to be more concerned about how and where the water enters the course, understanding that the water from all three of those points ends up in the Mariposa Pond, just to the west of hole number 16.
And that's not a good thing?
Well, that's where nature wants it to end up. What we're trying to do is we've got 4 audiences here that we're trying to satisfy. We have the Mariposa Homeowners Association, who rightfully want to be assured they know that in total volume there'll be a slight increase in the amount of water coming because there's more runoff. They want to know what we're doing to make sure the intensity of that and the velocity at which it gets there will either be the same or less than what it is today, and they have to sign off on the use of their pond as a crossing area for sanitary sewer. Mr. Snyder wants to know what the water coming off of the development is going to impact the golf course, both as to velocity and potential for erosion. Then you have the city engineering department, who has to write and sign a letter saying that they agree with all the analysis in the drainage study and present that to you, that the plan will work. And then there's the 4th audience, is you, who have to be convinced that you are approving a drainage plan that's not going to have negative impacts on any downstream owners. And so what the purpose of this is to try to just extract a little more detail and basically get everybody's concern list out, so that between now and when a final plat is actually scheduled for your consideration, that said, here's the concerns from these audiences, here's what's been done to address those concerns, so we can do that when the final plat's actually in front of you. Because the final plat is in a form where it's really ready to consider. It's just that the drainage issues have not been put to bed in terms of everybody's satisfaction, I believe.
I have a question for Mr. Nelson and maybe Mr. Campbell both. At our last meeting, you showed us a really ingenious design, the retention trench that could be covered with grass. Did you guys think about that type of possibility?
At this point, we have not considered that as an option for this property.
Could that potentially be played over if you put one of those in? That could be and planted grass on top. You could play golf over the top of that. Is that a possibility?
I think that would be a possibility.
I think the question would be the location of that feature. Some of the issues that I mentioned before involve the hitting or the landing areas of each one of these golf holes is right at the level where that drains through across, and so those need to be taken in consideration. Initially, as Greg mentioned, when we had the pond up here, we thought it was a great opportunity for a water feature or a water hazard, not to the degree that it played out when we had our little test, but we're to the point where we feel that the water, a standing body of water, is not a necessity. We're concerned about the drainage or any additional damage. So we've kind of gone back on that particular thought on holding water or a pond itself. So the dry bottom ponds or dry bottom detention is fine as long as it meets all the needs that Dean's mentioned.
Going downstream to the Mariposa Pond, is it large enough to take this extra water that's going to come off of this subdivision? Because it's all going to go through that pond, isn't it?
Well, my understanding from what you said is you're going to be sending less water downstream already. If it's already taking the money or taking the water, the way I understand it, they're going to be receiving less water. If that's true, what's the problem?
They will be taking more volume, but it will be released at a slower rate than what it is currently being accepted.
So there is going to be more water going in.
Yes.
Well, there has to be more water. It may be a slower rate, but there'll be more
It will take
water.
longer to get there than it does today.
Mm-hmm. How fast does it dissipate out of that Mariposa Pond? Is it pretty fast?
And probably let the representatives of Mariposa speak to that.
Yeah.
We do. If we'd like to do that, John, I guess this would be a time. There were owners there in the Mariposa edition took some video of an August rainstorm coming across the golf course into the pond.
This has no audio.
Yeah, we don't
Singing in the
we don't
rain.
have the audio, but that is the 16th fairway adjacent to the Mariposa
Looks to me
pond.
like that golf course is a real problem. We're going to have to do away with that golf course. Getting in the way of our developments.
Wow. That's a lot of water.
Understand this is only an inch and a half rain.
So that's what happens now, and you're concerned, of course, that that's only going to get bigger.
Well, it's eroding.
Could you come to the lectern, please? Your name?
Hi, my name is Daryl Huff. I'm on the Mariposa board, but I live right off the 16th fairway and have lived there for 12 years, and I've witnessed this, and I've shot all this. This is the little flume that comes off the golf course, and we use it for entertainment. We have a series of boats that we sail down that on a regular basis, and these are my two little girls. There's a solution to this. We're all for this development, and I think we want to work with them. The issue is, the reality is, we're getting a lot of water there. When the Graves family developed this land, there was Mariposa 1, 2, 3, and 4. Since then, they sold to Lee Hayworth the development what we'd call Mariposa 3, which is now Cedar Ridge. Now Mariposa 4 is that. So they would have all been underneath this homeowners association, all paying their $400 a month or a year to help support this. So now Mariposa 1 and 2 are solely responsible for maintaining our pond or our park. Between all the water coming off this proposed development, any other development, and what we're getting from the golf course, we've spent tens of thousands of dollars over the years maintaining it. Tens of thousands of dollars because of the erosion. Now, granted, I think the most of it's coming off the golf course. Now, is there a solution? Yes. And I think we can find some common ground on it. I think a lot of it would be see this water coming across there? We have a little 2-foot concrete flume. Perhaps the development in the city would put in a 8-foot, 10-foot concrete flume.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I
don't want to pay for it.
Yeah. I live in a cheap house on State Street and I haven't spent $1 in 12 years on water runoff.
But you can see this is what we get. Now,
It's all about location.
That is one thing, but the water coming off the course is coming in just a little area like this, but it's all being eroded around it. And if that
I know the area you're talking about. Yeah, I know the area you're talking about.
And so, is there a solution to this? Yes, but I'm tired of paying for it.
Yeah, no kidding.
And the families in Mariposa 1 and 2 paying for it. And this is a regular site. And it's fun at times when we get the little boats out and sail down it, but then we have to mow it, maintain it, bring in dirt, it's...
Now, this is on the golf course.
No, this is our Mariposa Park. This is what's coming off onto that. And if you were to, I don't know if you can back that up again. Okay, this is the golf course.
Mm-hmm.
And this golf course land, and as soon as you come down on the right, that's out of bounds.
Off 16 bottom. The hill.
Out of bounds marker here. Coming across here. So this is the 16th fairway. I live over here. This is the water that sheds off here, this way and that way. It all funnels into two places. This is the worst. But again, there's a little bit of a concrete thing here, and if we get anything over a decent rain, it just can't handle it all. And whether it's controlled or uncontrolled from Cornerstone or from the Grand Prairie, we're getting more water.
Well, no question about that.
And
How about on the other side of Mariposa Pond where it empties into the waterway? You have problems there?
That's what the detention pond controls.
yeah.
It maintains that.
If you follow this, there is a big pipe at the other end where there's a dam, and it seems to do a good job of controlling it. I think with this particular rain of an inch, and this was in August of this year, that pipe is what, in diameter is what? Probably 30 inches, and it filled up halfway just with the 1 inch rain, so it'll handle a little bit more.
Is that a dry pond?
Yes.
Between-
And we mow it every other week. And
Does it take the water to go out of there?
If it's full, we'll get it out in 24 hours. But
Yeah.
very seldom does.
Now with a 30-inch drain.
but we try to keep it to where, when I moved in there 12 years ago, it was horrible, and I mean, we had ducks living. I mean, it was nice if you wanted to go hunting, but it was there was cattails. It was horrible, and we wanted, it was the whole idea that actually the developer called it Mariposa Park. And it was supposed to be a park-like setting. And we've spent a lot of money to try to maintain it. And again, we mow it, we put grass in there. The problem is when we get this kind of rain off the golf course, and what may be the additional rain from the proposed development, what we're asking for is some common ground here, and what can we do to maintain this water here, and whether or not it's a partnership between the city and Cornerstone, find that solution. And one of the things we've been asked to do is to grant an easement across the pond there for utilities, which we own, and we're willing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, we're pro-development. I want to see more houses on the tax rolls, and so we're for that.
Tell me this, the biggest problem you're having is the fact that this water is moving fast and it's eroding. Is that your biggest problem? Maintenance costs as well. So if these new detention ponds in Cornerstone are going to slow that water down, that's going to help you. I mean, if that's the case, I don't know. We're just throwing this up here. If that's going to slow it down, that's going to help with your erosion. But now the detention becomes the issue. Is that right?
Yeah, but
Do you think that some of the stuff coming off Cornerstone is causing this high speed, or is this pure golf course?
coming across there, but there's just sheets of water coming across the golf course that's collecting it.
Uh-huh.
You know, if it's been dry, hasn't rained for a while, and we get a quarter-inch rain, it all absorbs.
No problem.
Just that when we get to that steady rain, it eventually, you know, if it's a 2 or 3 hour rain, all of a sudden the saturation point gets there, and all of a sudden it just comes off in sheets.
Uh-huh.
It's supposed to, so it's controlled.
So is part of your hopes that maybe Cornerstone will join your homeowners association and help pay for this? Is that, I mean, ultimately, just say it.
That would be great. Or
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
If there's a solution to this, and again,
Yeah.
we're all for.
The development?
Yeah. I mean, but I think there's an issue of, there needs to be some money spent to help get this water from the golf course out of bounds to our dam where it leaves, and so we don't have to spend all the money maintaining it. Now, I think.
Well, you know, most golf courses have a pond and use irrigation off that pond. Is there any possibility of trapping that water and using it? I mean, you're using treated water now to water your fairways or not? What are you off of?
Irrigation wells.
Irrigation wells in the area. Is there any way that?
We actually have 4 wells down in the Bill Burke area, one on Bill Burke north side, and there's 3 on the south. We pump it up the hill, and it's discharged into the holding pond just south of Crawford and then pumped out on the course. So it's all irrigation. We don't use any treated city water for irrigation.
Is there any way to landscape with some berms and so that this can be specifically directed and?
Well, I think that's some of the problem. It's directed, you know, too small of an area, so the velocities are too high. You know, kind of like that we were talking about earlier, if you can spread that out, then velocities come down. But there is a concrete culvert or underneath all that, and right now it's almost gone. It's almost washed out. So that's probably going to cost us another $4 or $5 grand to get that thing replaced. And it's an ongoing issue. We replaced the dam here 7-8 years ago. It washed out. It was $25,000. And there's not that many homeowners in the Mariposa homeowner sections, so it's a big drain on the pocketbook. And, our concern, or my concern, is a lot of this. Excuse me, my name is Paul Carpenter. But a lot of this water is not coming from where these guys are going to put the development. But a lot of it's coming from the golf course itself.
Mr. Snyder, you're not being a very good neighbor.
You did a real good job cutting the grass.
Yeah, they don't complain when they're golfing on it. Yeah. Well, I guess for me, I look at the whole thing and I think if a lot of this has come off the golf course, I tend to look and say, what's it? My feeling would be, why is it Cornerstone's fault? If they're doing their part of slowing the water down and really taking care of what they're adding to the scenario, really you've got a problem more with the golf course than what they're doing. I mean, is that the case? I mean, if it
I think we have a problem with
both. I mean, I hate to blame Cornerstone. That's incredible. I mean, really, I don't think there's one of us up here that isn't a little shocked at that amount of water. But
And remember, this is a small rain. This is not a large rain.
yeah.
John? If you have kids and boats.
Yeah.
Small animals, maybe not so good.
Yeah.
John, could you show us on the map where this photo here is actually at?
It's about here.
John, do we have on the aerial PDFs, we have the subdivision with contours? Could we go to that
On the
one?
west side of 16.
Yes.
So-
Where's the pond then? Mariposa Pond?
Right in this area.
Okay.
There's this 16 fairway going north.
But when that water was flowing, it was sort of coming down from that 16th fairway and down there.
Well, see, and that's what I mentioned earlier, that now it's on all the time. All the landing areas, this is the low area all the way across all these fairways. So you have slopes both directions on each one of these hills. This is always the low area. So yes, you have water coming down this direction, you have water coming from the tee box going north. On each one of these holes, same thing. I guess these are the fairways, the dark green. So that's where you saw on that video that water was coming down the hill, and that's exactly what that does.
Now, you said you had, what, like a 2-foot flume across the golf course that was eroding, Mr. Snyder?
Well,
The 2-foot flume they're referring to is in the Mariposa Pond.
Why wouldn't have just trapped
can I show you a picture?
Yeah.
That's not a real landing zone.
This is kind of
The left side of 16 isn't.
This flume is right down in this area right here. There's a culvert that runs underneath across the 16 fairway, comes over the other side. So there's water coming in from that, plus this water that's coming down from the golf course.
I'm trying to figure out. I don't know where the property lines are, though.
Pretty intense, yeah.
That's what my golf course.
Is someone from Brookstone Property here,
Cornerstone.
or Cornerstone? Kind of seems to me that Cornerstone is going to have to take some primary responsibility on the golf course and the Mariposa Pond area of making necessary improvements to handle the extra runoff that's coming from this proposed development.
I'm Bill Shepard. I'm with Cornerstone Development Group. I just wanted to make a couple points, and I'm no engineer, but I guess I just want to understand, and I understand it, that we're slowing the water down. We're not increasing the velocity.
Right.
There may be more volume, but the velocity is not going to increase, meaning the pond's not going to fill up any faster than what it's filling up now. It may fill and drain longer, but not any higher than what it's doing now.
And could it potentially slow it down?
That's correct. That's what we understand, and I have to rely on our engineers and city engineering staff to...
Yeah, I would think all that water coming from the south is going to get slowed down.
We actually have water coming into our development, into our proposed pond areas that we're actually retaining that right now comes right through. So we're retaining the amount of water that, the increased amount of water that our development increases over it now. What we're doing, we're retaining stuff that's coming to us that's actually going through there now.
Right.
We may not be catching everything that's coming off of our development. We're catching the increase that our development, what the engineers say our development is increasing.
Right. And slowing it down, as we said.
Over a longer period of time, there's going to be more water, and as more of that land develops, I'm sure that's going to increase over time. So, I mean, it's...
Where's
it
the
comes-
dam on here?
Pardon?
Where's the dam that you were talking?
Which dam?
Show that.
Or their retaining area. I think it's right over
Water's coming through here. It is right.
Oh,
Okay, where that
so it's
road
over
is.
here.
here.
So this is that, this little white line you see is actually that little concrete flume we have.
Oh, this. is-
One point I may make, and Mariposa is probably different than any other drainage easement area in town. They actually own their drainage easement, and I don't know. I mean, they take the responsibility of maintaining it. We have the option, and we are going to do that. In our drainage pond areas, we are going to, the city will come up with a fee for a 20-year maintenance, and we actually turn the ownership of that pond over to the city, so they will maintain it, so we don't have to worry about the issues that they have. Obviously, it's an expense for us to do that, but that's something we choose to do up front, so we don't have to end up with the maintenance issues that they have now. I don't know if that's an option for them, and maybe it is. I don't know.
No.
Just looking at the drainage, what Greg Adams has done, they're detaining approximately 35 acres of water. Their development is approximately 35 acres. They're not detaining their 35 acres, but they're detaining a total of 35 acres.
Right.
And a lot of that is coming off the golf course. So the golf course was there many moons before Mariposa, and there's no reason to think that the golf course is putting any more water on anybody at this point. But this development, we believe it should help. Now the question of Mariposa's maintenance on their pond is a whole nother issue.
Right. That's my take on it, is if they're retaining their amount of water, it's slowing down the water flow, maybe some. I mean, if nothing else, if it helps that high-speed erosion from yours, I'd say Cornerstone is already a friend to you by slowing down a lot of that stuff that's coming down from the south and maybe helping with some of that golf course. They're not increasing, like you said, any water amount. I can't see where we're pushing any further on Cornerstone for this issue. Sounds to me like we now have like you said, a new issue with their,
And we'll have to work with...
provided you can hold the volume.
Right. We'll have to work with they have to give basically a sanitary easement, is that right, Wayne? I mean, we're going to need to get an easement from Mariposa. They're going to want something in return probably for that. So we'll just have to work out what that is. I don't know what that'll be. We have to look at the issue and the erosion and whatever issues they've got there. But as far as the volume of water goes, city staff met with Parks and Rec today and the developers here, and we'll just have to come up with a solution, and I think we're pretty close, actually, that works. It was just investigating the major change from the last time you guys saw this plat, and the final plat being a lot different than the preliminary plat, basically. Does that make sense, Dean? Is that about right?
Yeah, I think it's not something that you just bring in cold, and especially, like I said, we have the golf course needs to grant easements to the Cornerstone Group for some detention on the golf course. The Mariposa Group needs to consent to the sanitary sewer easement coming across and through their pond. And so, again, we thought the purpose of this is so you would be aware of each of those interest groups' concerns, and then it's incumbent on staff to work with Mr. Adams and Cornerstone and say, all right, this is what we heard from golf course staff, here's how we're going to address that concern, here's what we heard from Mariposa, here's how we're going to address that concern, and we can do that and report back to you when the final plat's in front of you.
Yeah, we've been at this now almost an hour, and we haven't solved it, and I didn't expect to solve it today, but I think your idea of continuing working and as suggested, the solution doesn't appear to be too far away. We just encourage you to keep on working and get her done.
And I suppose you could visit the city commission with your video and visit with them about the issues of runoff
A
from...
suggestion or a recommendation?
Well,
Steve doesn't want to attend any more meetings. Yeah, he's not paid enough to be here this often, is he?
There's a solution. I mean, we'll find some common ground.
Yeah, you can work it out. It doesn't seem impossible. It's just a matter of who does what.
Yeah.
Okay, Dean, thank you. Item number 6, anything you want to tell us about?
No, we have the two items that we're working on would be getting the Grand Prairie Edition final plat into a form where it's ready for your consideration in a final plat format, and all the off-site easements that would go with that, and also a follow-up final plat to Magnolia Commons, which you had here earlier today. Both of those could come as soon as the 18th if we do our work correctly.
Okay, no further issues. Let's adjourn.
I'm going to leave these here. I don't know if we'll use them again or...
Yeah, we'd be glad to take those back.
Yeah, thank you.